We're on chapter 13 of our book, Wild Rescuers Escape to the Mesa. And we're on chapter 13 and there's 20 chapters, so we have about 1 week left of this book. And we're going to get started. Now, I wasn't sure what a hoodoo was, so I had to look it up. A hoodoo is a column or pinnacle of weathered rock, which is really cool because I think I've seen some in Las Vegas and in the Badlands when I went to Montana. All right, chapter 13. Within seconds, an entire cacophony of coyote howls could be heard, first coming from the north, and then, a minute later, another pack replying from the south. Stacy and her pack were caught in the middle. "What do we do?" Stacy whispered, straining to see any of her wolves' faces with a low light from the embers that were left of their campfire. Everest opened one eye and twitched an ear at her. Tucker yawned. Stacy realized the wolves were unfazed by the coyotes. Interesting, she thought. While the idea of dozens of scrappy coyotes was terrifying to her, Stacy's wolves knew their place at the top of the food chain and were completely unworried. She instantly felt safer and nestled in closer to Paige and Tucker. Finally, she drifted off to sleep, the coyote howls echoing in her ears. The next morning, the group set off in search of a better campsite, somewhere a little less out in the open and with a water source, and, if Stacy had her way, not in the middle of rival coyote packs. They headed south toward the hoodoos, much to Stacy's delight. She'd read a page about them in an H encyclopedia book she read. She had pored over the pages for honeybees, hoodoos, horses, horticulture, and hot springs, and lamented that she didn't have books for more letters of the alphabet. Stacy had been especially fascinated by the hoodoos, how majestic they were, how each one was unique, kind of like the mesa's fingerprints, how they were actually formed by water but now resided in dry desert biomes. She was quite excited to see one in person. As they approached the hoodoos, Stacy hopped onto Wink's back so she could stare up at them without tripping. She couldn't get over how tall they were, and up close she could see that they almost appeared to be striped with different color striations in the rocks. Suddenly, there was a bat blocking her view. "Milo, move," Stacy said, swatting the air gently, not to actually hit Milo, but to get her point across that he was blocking her breathtaking view of the hoodoos. But Milo was relentless. He circled around Stacy's head and then flew over to Paige, whose ears were swiveling wildly. "Wait, a rescue?" Stacy asked. She knew Milo could alert them to an animal rescue at any time, but for some reason Stacy had assumed it would be after they had settled into their mesa home and built a proper campsite. But an animal in trouble had to be their priority. "All right, Milo," Stacy said. "Lead the way." The wolves and Paige raced down the steep trail surrounding the hoodoos while Stacy still on Wink's back. Stacy was relieved she wasn't running herself when she looked over the side of the switchbacks they were traversing and saw the small rocks rolling straight down the sides of the thin trail they were on. Milo came to an abrupt stop in the middle of the trail, causing all the wolves to dig their paws into the red dirt, sending more rocks and pebbles careening off the trail and into the ravines on either side of them. Stacy's eyes followed the following rocks as they rolled down and down until they landed about 20 feet below her at the bottom of the ravine next to a small donkey. "A donkey!" The donkey was gray, with patches of white on his ears and his muzzle. Oh, guys, I'm loving this already. He had a saddlebag, and a striped blanket draped over his back. He didn't appear injured, but he looked sad. Stacy couldn't tell if he looked so sad because that's how all donkeys looked, or if it was because he was stuck at the bottom of a ravine. "He's stuck," Stacy said. "It's too steep for him to climb up." Stacy hopped off Wink, and before she could form a plan with the wolves, she was sliding, or falling rather, down the red sand on the side of the ravine. She landed with a soft thud next to the donkey. "Oops," Stacy said, hopping up and steadying herself by placing her hands on the donkey's back. "Well, I can see how you could have slid down here accidentally. I'm just going to climb back up and talk to my wolf pack about how best to rescue you. Don't worry, they aren't interested in eating you. We do this kind of thing all the time. Animal rescues, that is, not finding donkeys in ravines next to hoodoos. No, that's definitely a first." The donkey nosed curiously at her face, and Stacy patted him on his muzzle. "I'm rambling. You don't understand me. I'm going to go, but I'll be right back." Stacy started to walk up the side of the ravine, but slid right back down to where she started with every step she took. Okay, this should make for an interesting animal rescue. It appears now that I need rescuing too. Stacy peered up at her wolves and Paige, who were all staring down at her with concerned expressions. Not to worry, guys, Stacy hollered out to them. I came down to, assess the situation. Noah, could you please throw me that rope from your pack? Noah reached into the pack, pulled out the rope with his teeth, and tossed it down to where Stacy and the donkey were standing, keeping one end of it in its mouth. Great, Stacy shouted. Okay, now I'm going to need a bunch of small, sturdy sticks about 3 feet in length. I think I saw some dead bushes a little ways back on the trail that you might be able to break. The wolves and Paige disappeared for a few minutes. One by one, they returned with sticks in their mouths that they tossed down to Stacy. While they continued tossing down the sticks, Stacy rummaged through the donkey's saddlebag for anything that might prove useful to their current situation. There wasn't much, but there was rope. Good sturdy climbing rope, and that was all that Stacy needed to begin formulating an escape plan. She took one of the sticks and lashed it onto the side of the climbing rope so that a piece of the stick poked out from either side of the rope. She repeated this, spacing the sticks about 2 feet apart until she'd reached the end of the rope. And then she tied off a large loop at one of the ends and tossed it up the hill where Everest caught it. All right, she muttered to herself. Time to see if this works. Leaning forward on the slope of the ravine, Stacy grabbed hold of the highest stick she could reach on the rope. She held the stick with both hands on opposite sides of the rope and then did the same with her feet, stepping up onto the stick closest to her boots. She wobbled back and forth for a bit, but it worked. The stick that her feet were on sank into the sand, giving her a sturdy foothold that prevented her from sliding back down. The line of sticks would form a track to support her feet as she walked. Okay, Stacy said, it works for me. Whether I can teach a donkey to do it is another matter entirely. Stacy looked up at Everest. He was holding the rope in his mouth and suddenly realized what Stacy was about to do. He quickly motioned for all the other wolves to grab hold of the rope. Meanwhile, Noah tightened his hold on the vine rope that Stacy was grasping as a guide. Okay, here goes nothing, Stacy said, hopping onto the donkey and holding the vine rope in one hand while taking the reins in her other. The donkey brayed loudly and then took a step forward. Easy, Stacy said softly. Easy, boy. Stacy had never used reins before. She'd never ridden a horse before, let alone a donkey, but she realized she was going to need to learn how to use reins pretty quickly if she had any hope of getting this donkey out of the ravine. Luckily, the donkey had naturally found the first stick on his own when he'd stepped forward. Now the tricky part would be getting him to take the perfect step forward to the next one in hopes he would find his footing again. If Stacy could get him to do that, she was pretty confident she could guide him in a straight line up and out of the ravine. But if he didn't step in the right places, the tracks of stick in the sand wouldn't stop his hooves from sliding backwards. Stacy and the donkey walked back and forth for what must have been a half an hour. Stacy imagined they must have looked as if they were dancing. It was midday now, and the sun was directly over Stacy's head, beating down on her and the donkey. She was covered in sweat, but determined to succeed in this rescue. All of a sudden, Stacy saw Wink flying through the air above her. He jumped the full 20 feet down the ravine and landed, surprisingly gracefully, at Stacy's feet. Wink! Stacy exclaimed. She stared at his legs, which were firmly planted in the red sand. How did you do that and not break every bone in your body? Wink shrugged and positioned himself behind the donkey. The donkey snorted and jerked his head up and down. He definitely did not like being this close to a wolf. Quickly, he stepped forward and started walking up the tracks of sticks with in the sand, with Wink guiding his hoofs toward each stick, one after the other. Good job, Stacy shouted, looking over her shoulder at Wink, whose nose was just inches from the donkey's behind. Don't let him take any steps backward. The donkey had figured out how to step on the sunken footholds by this point and took off up the ravine, trying to get away from Wink. As soon as he reached the top, though, he saw there were 5 wolves waiting for him, and he reared back on his hind legs, braying with fear. Stacy almost toppled backward. For a moment, she hung dizzyingly over the edge of the ravine. She quickly swung her leg over the donkey's back and managed to jump off. She scrambled up the rest of the rope ladder, pulling on the reins so hard that the donkey had no choice but to come down from his hind legs and walk the rest of the way up the ravine and onto the trail, resisting all the way. Back up, guys, Stacy said to her wolves. Give him some space. We don't want him falling down again. The wolves retreated about 10 yards down the trail, including an exhausted Wink, while Stacy looked over the donkey one last time to make sure he didn't have any injuries. "You probably travel this trail every day, huh, boy?" Stacy said to him, untying the sticks and stuffing the climbing rope into her satchel and pulling out an apple and feeding it to the donkey. "Go on, then. Catch up with your group. Hopefully they won't miss his rope too much." The donkey ate the apple and buried his muzzle into the crook of Stacy's arm. She pressed her face against his. "Everest, can donkeys live in the taiga?" Stacy yelled back to the pack's alpha. She knew the answer, though. The big white alpha shook his head no. "I'm going to miss you, boy," she whispered to the donkey. "Be good." And with that, the donkey let out a happy bray, began lumbering down the switchbacks in search of his own pack. "That donkey obviously belonged to someone. How cute was he, huh?" Stacy said to her wolves as they returned to where she stood. "Either tourists or tour guides. I'd like to avoid both if possible, so I think we should head back north to camp." The group retraced their steps from the morning, passing their campsite from the previous night and heading into the low mountains to the north. This was exactly the type of rugged terrain Stacy had been hoping to find when she first hatched her plan to hide away from the taiga for a month or two. The chance that another person would be out here in the desert mesas was very slim. They were just coming up to a flat stretch of trail when Stacy looked up from the steep pathway she was navigating and let out a sharp gasp. It sounded a lot like a horse neighing. She was right about not seeing another person, but she had completely forgotten about mountain lions, and there was one standing right in front of her.